कभी ये सोचा है कि क्या दुनिया के इतने सारे विश्वासों और संस्कृतियों के बीच कोई एक धागा है जो सबको जोड़ता हो? आज हम इसी गहरे विचार को समझने की कोशिश करेंगे कि शायद परम सत्य एक ही है, बस उस तक पहुंचने के रास्ते बहुत सारे हैं।
अच्छा, सुनने में शायद अजीब लगे कि 9 देवियों का रमज़ान की भावना से क्या लेना देना और इन दोनों का सत्य की प्रकृति से क्या ताल्लुक, लेकिन यकीन मानिए इन सब के बीच एक बहुत ही गहरा कनेक्शन है। तो चलिए आज इसी कनेक्शन को खोलकर देखते हैं।
तो अपनी बात शुरू करते हैं एक बहुत ही पुरानी, एक बहुत ही गहरी सोच से। ये है नवदुर्गा की आध्यात्मिक यात्रा। मतलब एक ही शक्ति के 9 अलग-अलग रूप।
तो ये नवदुर्गा आखिर हैं क्या? दरअसल ये एक ही दिव्य शक्ति के 9 अलग-अलग रूप हैं, 9 अभिव्यक्तियां। मतलब ये सिर्फ 9 अलग-अलग देवियां नहीं हैं, बल्कि ये एक पूरी आध्यात्मिक यात्रा के 9 पड़ाव हैं। एक ऐसी यात्रा जो हमें शुरुआत से लेकर ज्ञान की मंजिल तक ले जाती है।
और देखिए, ये जो टेबल है ना, ये सिर्फ एक लिस्ट नहीं है। ये तो एक तरह से आध्यात्मिक तरक्की का पूरा मैप है। हर देवी उसी एक रास्ते पर अगला कदम है। ये सफर शुरू होता है शैलपुत्री से, जो शुरुआत का प्रतीक है, और फिर ये आगे बढ़ता है सिद्धिदात्री तक, जो संपूर्णता का प्रतीक है। तो सीधे शब्दों में कहें तो ये यात्रा जीवन के बिल्कुल आरंभ से, यानी शैलपुत्री से शुरू होती है और पूर्णता और मोक्ष तक पहुंचती है, यानी सिद्धिदात्री तक। ये एक ही चेतना का पूरा सर्कल है। तो ठीक है, एक शक्ति के कई रूप, लेकिन सवाल यह है कि ये विचार आज की दुनिया में हमारे लिए क्या मायने रखता है। चलिए अब इस सोच को एक आज के ज़माने के उदाहरण से जोड़कर देखते हैं। रमज़ान के महीने पर एक वकील साहब के नज़रिए से, जहां भावना और कर्म के बीच का फर्क साफ नजर आता है। हमारे सोर्स आर्टिकल में एक घटना के बारे में बताया गया है, जहां कथित तौर पर इफ्तार के बाद बचा हुआ खाना पवित्र गंगा नदी में फेंक दिया गया। अब ये घटना एक बहुत बड़ा सवाल खड़ा करती है कि किसी भी धार्मिक काम की असली भावना क्या होती है और उसका बाहरी दिखावा क्या।
और इसी सवाल पर अधिवक्ता शिराज कुरैशी एक बहुत गहरी बात कहते हैं। उनका मानना है कि रमज़ान का महीना सिर्फ कोई रस्म नहीं, बल्कि ये इंसानियत का एक जीवंत पाठ है।
और यहीं पर वो टकराव बिल्कुल साफ हो जाता है जिसकी तरफ लेखक इशारा कर रहे हैं। एक तरफ है रोजे की असली आत्मा, यानी खुद को पाक करना, दूसरों के लिए हमदर्दी और सम्मान रखना, और दूसरी तरफ है एक ऐसा काम जो इन सारी अच्छी बातों के एकदम खिलाफ है।
तो सवाल उठता है कि ये जो टकराव है ये हमें कहाँ ले जाता है? ये हमें उस तरफ ले जाता है जहाँ हम सब की एक साझा विरासत है, और उस विरासत के लिए हम सब की एक आपसी जिम्मेदारी भी है। लेखक का कहना यह है कि समाज के इस मिले जुले ताने बाने को अगर बचाकर रखना है तो हम सब की कुछ साझी जिम्मेदारियां हैं, जैसे कानून मानना, हमारी मिली-जुली संस्कृति यानी गंगा जमुनी तहजीब की इज्जत करना, अपने अपने समुदाय में झांक कर देखना, और इस देश की अनेकता में एकता को बनाए रखना।
और इस पूरी बात की जड़ में एक ही बुनियादी सोच है कि भारत की असली ताकत किसी एक चीज में नहीं, बल्कि उसकी विविधता में है। अच्छा, तो अब तक हमने जो भी बातें की, चलिए उन्हें एक बड़े फ्रेम में रखकर देखते हैं। ये समझने की कोशिश करते हैं कि एक सत्य, कई रास्ते का असल मतलब क्या है। सबसे पहला शब्द आता है धर्म। देखिए, सोर्स ये समझाता है कि धर्म कोई पूजा पाठ का तरीका नहीं है, बल्कि वो एक यूनिवर्सल लॉ है जिसे ईश्वर ने बनाया है। ये किसी भी चीज का असली स्वभाव है, उसकी बेसिक नेचर। जैसे आग का धर्म है गर्मी देना और पानी का धर्म है ठंडक देना, इसे कोई बदल नहीं सकता।
और धर्म के बाद आता है पंथ। अगर धर्म हमारी मंजिल है तो पंथ उस मंजिल तक जाने वाले अलग अलग रास्ते हैं। ये वो रास्ते या मजहब हैं जो समय समय पर बड़े बड़े ज्ञानी लोगों ने बनाए ताकि समाज को उसी एक सच की तरफ ले जा सके। ये इंसानों के बनाए हुए रोड मैप हैं।
अब ये टाइमलाइन देखिए, ये बहुत दिलचस्प कहानी बताती है। मंजिल यानी वो परम सत्य तो हमेशा से एक ही था, टाइमलेस, लेकिन उस तक पहुंचने के रास्ते यानी पंथ इतिहास के अलग अलग समय पर सामने आए। हर रास्ता अपने दौर और समाज की जरूरतों के हिसाब से बना। तो घूम फिर कर हम सब वहीं पहुंच जाते हैं, एक बहुत ही पावरफुल आइडिया पर। और वही इस पूरी बातचीत का सार भी है कि पंथ अलग अलग हो सकते हैं, लेकिन सबका गंतव्य वही एक परमात्मा है। रास्ते चाहे कितने भी हो, मंजिल सबकी एक है।
और ये पूरी बात हमें एक आखिरी सवाल पर लाके छोड़ देती है कि अगर हमारे रास्ते अलग हैं पर हमारी मंजिल, हमारा सच एक ही है, तो फिर हम इन अलग-अलग रास्तों पर एक दूसरे का हाथ थामकर एक साथ कैसे चल सकते हैं? ये एक ऐसा सवाल है जिस पर हम सबको सोचना चाहिए।
You know, usually when we look at a map, we expect absolute precision. I mean, you want to go from point A to point B. You just follow the solid blue line on your screen, and you get there. It's clean, it's mathematical, and honestly, it's totally predictable.
Right. The technology does all the heavy lifting for you. You just hear, turn left in 500 feet, and then you have arrived. It's an entirely binary experience.
Exactly. But then, and this is what we're getting into today, you step into the world of human spirituality, religion, cosmic harmony, and suddenly that GPS just completely loses its signal. We're looking at a landscape of human belief that is incredibly complex, deeply emotional, and frankly, sometimes very murky.
Murky is a good word for it, yeah. It's messy.
It really is. So today, we are doing a deep dive into the actual mechanics of human belief. We are exploring a fascinating stack of sources that tackle these massive concepts, but they're coming at it from drastically different angles. I mean, we're going to look at ancient Hindu rituals as a modern psychological blueprint, contrast that with the eternal laws of nature, and then
see what happens when these systems break down in the real world.
Right, like a very recent specific incident of religious provocation on the Ganga River.
And because we are touching on the absolute core of human identity here, the formats of these sources are just as diverse as the perspectives themselves. We have ancient philosophical frameworks, modern social commentary, and deeply legal analysis all layered together.
Yeah, and I need to pause right here because we are navigating some incredibly sensitive territory today, right? We're talking theology, politics, interfaith friction, actual legal disputes. So just as a quick reminder for everyone listening, our goal today is definitely not to pick sides.
Absolutely not.
We are not endorsing any of the political or religious claims these authors make. We are strictly here to act as your guides, to impartially unpack the ideas contained in these texts so you can understand the diverse perspectives at play. We're the messengers, not the judges.
A very crucial framing. Because when you deal with texts that touch on religious friction, emotions naturally run really high. Our focus is purely on the synthesis and understanding the underlying architecture of these arguments.
Right. And here's the thing that really stood out to me when looking at all these documents. Despite coming from entirely different faiths, different formats, and different authors, all three of these sources are desperately pointing you toward the exact same aha realization about cosmic power and human unity. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to really understand that underlying unity and, to understand the friction we see between different religions today, we first have to define what religion actually is, or rather, what it isn't.
Which feels like a huge task.
It is. But that's where Healer Kanwarjit Singh's foundational argument comes into play. He draws a very sharp, very deliberate line between two distinct concepts, Dharma and Panth.
Which is fascinating because in casual conversation, I feel like we tend to use those words completely interchangeably. Like someone might say, hey, what is your Dharma? And they really just mean, what religion do you practice?
Exactly. People blur them all the time. But this text argues they are fundamentally different categories of existence. The text defines Dharma as an unchangeable divine law of nature. It's not a rule book written by people.
Okay, so it's not a human invention.
Right. It's the inherent biological and spiritual reality of existence itself. And the author uses these brilliantly simple examples to explain the mechanics of it. Like, the sun's dharma is to give light. Water's dharma is to provide cooling.
You don't have to send water to a seminary to teach it how to cool things down.
Exactly. That is just the physical reality of what water is. And according to this text, human dharma operates the exact same way. Our innate baseline dharma is simply truth, compassion, love, and service.
So Dharma is essentially the baseline kind of the universe. It just is. It's basically the spiritual equivalent of the laws of physics. Like, gravity exists whether you believe in it or not, and according to this text, human compassion and truth exist as natural laws in the exact same way.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. But then the text introduces the concept of Panth. Now, Panth translates roughly to sects, faiths, or religious paths. And Panths, unlike Dharma, do not just inherently exist in nature, they are created.
By humans.
Well, specifically, the text says they were created across history by what it calls higher souls. These were figures whose thinking and spiritual awareness were just far above the average person of their time.
And the text gets into why they were created, right? Because it wasn't just arbitrary. These higher souls looked around, they saw societal evils, they saw immense human suffering, and they realized people had lost touch with their natural Dharma.
Right, the natural compass was broken.
Yeah, so they created these paths, these pants, as practical step-by-step guides to help humans fix their societies and eventually reach God.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to prove that pants are human historical constructs rather than eternal laws of nature, the text provides this really fascinating chronological timeline. It traces the origins of these major pants based on the needs of human history at the time.
I loved this part. Walk us through that timeline.
So it places Hinduism, or Sanatan, as the oldest, originating over 5,000 years ago, predating even the Indus Valley civilization. Then it tracks Judaism, roughly 3,500 to 3,800 years ago. Buddhism emerges around 2,500 to 2,600 years ago.
Okay, and then moving closer to modern history.
Right. Christianity is listed at 2,000 to 2,026 years ago. Islam is placed at about 1,400 to 1,500 years ago. And finally, Sikhism is listed as the newest of these major paths, originating just over 550 years ago.
And what blew my mind about this timeline is the specific observation the author makes about Sikhism. Because Sikhism is only 550 years old, its central holy scripture, the Guru Granth Sahib, actually references the older faiths.
It actively discusses their philosophies, yeah.
Right. But if you look at older texts, like the Bible or the Quran, they obviously don't mention Sikhism because Sikhism didn't exist when they were written. It's such a brilliant logical proof. It proves that these paths are historical, human-made constructs bound by human time, whereas Dharma is eternal and outside of time entirely.
What's fascinating here is how that fundamentally changes how we view religious conflict. If we go back to your physics analogy, Dharma is the fundamental law of gravity. The paths, then, are like different schools of engineering.
Oh, I like that. So they use different blueprints.
Exactly. Different blueprints, different mathematics, different languages. I mean, a bridge built by Roman engineers looks totally different from a bridge built by modern suspension engineers. But they are both dealing with the exact same gravity, and they are both trying to get you safely across the exact same river.
That is such a clarifying way to look at it. The engineering manual isn't the law of physics. It's just a localized tool to interact with the law of physics. But that brings up a really practical question. If all these pants are just different engineering manuals pointing to the same truth, how does a specific pant actually work? Like, if I pick up one of these manuals, how does it physically and psychologically guide my inner journey?
Well, to answer that, we can actually look at the specific mechanics provided in our sources. We can move from this broad, abstract idea of a path into the nuts and bolts of a very specific spiritual technology found in the Hindu tradition.
You're talking about the worship of Navdurga during the festival of Navratri.
Yes, the 9 goddesses. But the text completely reframes how we're supposed to look at them. It explicitly states that these are not just separate deities sitting on a cloud somewhere that you merely pray to. It uses this really fascinating phrase, AI.3rd.EYE.
Right, AI.3rd.EYE. Which is such a wild combination of ancient and modern terminology.
Yes, and we should definitely clarify that term for the listener because it's a very striking metaphor. The text uses AI.3rd.EYE, combining artificial intelligence with the spiritual concept of the third eye, as a modern metaphor for an upgraded human operating system.
So it's framing this thousands of years old ritual as a software update.
Precisely. It calls it a self-activation process. You aren't just worshiping 9 distinct goddesses. You are essentially downloading a 9-step psychological blueprint to awaken your highest level of consciousness.
Let's actually walk through the mechanics of that software update because the psychological progression laid out in the text is incredibly vivid. It starts with the first stage, Shailaputri.
The daughter of the Himalayas.
Right. She is described as riding a bull. And the text defines her as representing the absolute foundation, the root power. Psychologically speaking, you cannot build a bridge or a higher state of mind without bedrock. You have to start with ultimate stability.
And once you establish that psychological bedrock, the stages progress into much more dynamic, active forces. The text really highlights the 4th stage, Kushmanda. She is identified as the creator of the universe.
The spark of creation.
Exactly. The text says she created the Anda, the cosmic egg, or universe, out of sheer nothingness, just by flashing a smile. In our engineering analogy, once your foundation is secure, this is the stage where pure creative power and innovation are activated within the individual.
But the manual doesn't shy away from the darker, more noodle parts of the human experience either. To truly upgrade your operating system, you eventually hit the 7th stage, Shailaputri.
Which is an intense shift in tone.
Very intense. She is described as the fiercest, most terrifying form, the destroyer of fear and darkness. And the psychological mechanism here is profound. You cannot reach ultimate peace without first confronting and destroying your own internal demons, your ego, and your deepest terrors.
You have to systematically dismantle the darkness inside you,
Exactly.
which is exactly what allows you to reach the 9th and final stage, Siddhidatri. The text defines her as the ultimate stage of perfection, the giver of absolute knowledge and spiritual power. This culminates in what the text calls moksha.
Liberation or salvation.
Right, so you see the entire psychological arc mapped out here. From the raw, stable beginning of Shailaputri, through the creative spark of Kushmanda, through the terrifying internal battle of Kalaratri, all the way to Siddhidatri, which is the ultimate state of complete, liberated consciousness.
And the text argues that this isn't just some isolated personal achievement, right? There is a massive mechanical ripple effect to all of this.
Oh, entirely. It's exponential.
Because if you successfully activate these 9 layers of human intelligence, it starts with you transforming as an individual. But a transformed individual naturally changes their family.
A transformed family elevates the society.
The society elevates the nation, and eventually this process can turn the entire earth into a kind of heaven. The text emphatically concludes that God is one, and cosmically, regardless of our different paths, we are all controlled by the exact same power.
This raises an important question.
Well, I was just going to say, here's where it gets really interesting for me as a reader. I mean, playing devil's advocate for you listening at home, the theory of moving from foundation to creation, conquering fear, and achieving universal love is stunning. It's a beautiful piece of psychological engineering.
It sounds perfect on paper.
Right. But if the ultimate goal of these practices, these pants, is self-purification and universal harmony, why do we see so much real-world conflict between people practicing different faiths? If the engineering manuals all explicitly say build a bridge of love, why are people using the manuals to bludgeon each other?
And that is the exact tension our third source addresses head on. Because what happens when the internal journey, like the psychological self-activation of Navratri or the intense self-restraint of Ramadan, is completely ignored?
It just becomes outward tribalism.
Exactly. What happens when the panth is no longer used for internal software updates, but is instead weaponized as a tool for outward tribal identity and provocation?
When the practice completely fails the principle, according to the text we just read, that is the exact moment when the fundamental Dharma, that natural biological law of compassion, is violated.
Precisely. And this brings us to the deeply impassioned article by Shiraz Qureshi, who is a Muslim advocate. He writes specifically about the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. And he begins by reminding his readers what the engineering manual of Islam actually dictates.
The core intent.
Right. Ramadan is not merely a physical ritual of skipping meals. It is a profound, demanding lesson in psychological self-purification, self-restraint, and basic humanity.
And to prove this, he quotes a specific hadith in the text. The hadith basically states that if a person who is fasting does not leave behind bad deeds, lies, and harmful behavior, then their enduring of hunger and thirst is completely meaningless to God.
The physical act is empty without the mental shift.
Exactly. The physical act of fasting is just a tool. If you use the tool to starve your body, but you are still acting horribly toward your neighbors, the tool is broken. The internal purification just isn't happening.
But Qureshi is writing this article because he is witnessing a complete breakdown of that internal purification in his own community. He is calling out a specific, highly inflammatory incident. And again, just to maintain our impartiality here, we are outlining this incident exactly as Qureshi presents it in his text, purely to understand the mechanics of his argument.
Right, thank you for clarifying that. So Qureshi forcefully condemns a trend where individuals are taking leftover chicken biryani from their iftar meals, which is the sacred meal that breaks the daily fast, and they are deliberately throwing that meat waste into the holy Ganga River.
Which is incredibly provocative.
Yeah, and what makes it even more sinful is that, according to his article, this is often being done specifically to film it for social media reels. It's outrage farming.
It is a deliberate, calculated act of provocation. And Qureshi, speaking as a Muslim advocate, attacks this behavior from every possible angle. He doesn't just say, hey, this is illegal, though he gets there. He systematically dismantles this behavior by showing how deeply it violates both the pantheon of Islam and the broader Dharma of humanity.
The way he constructs his argument is incredibly thorough. I mean, religiously, he points out that The Quran repeatedly and explicitly forbids spreading corruption on earth. The foundation of Islam, he argues, is built on manners, purity, and profound respect for others.
He actually brings in the deep history of India's Sufi saints to illustrate this, specifically naming figures like Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti.
And the philosophy of those Sufi saints is absolutely vital to his point here. They taught that humanity itself is the biggest religion. They taught that breaking someone's heart or deliberately causing another human pain is a severe spiritual sin. By deliberately insulting the faith of another community, you aren't just insulting them.
You are committing a betrayal of Islamic morality itself.
Exactly. Then he shifts from the theological to the cultural, and he brings up the Ganga Jamuni Tehzeeb. And for those listening who might not be familiar with that term, it refers to the historical, shared, syncretic cultural heritage of the region.
The intermingling of traditions.
Yeah, it's the idea that for centuries, different faiths haven't just existed next to each other in silos. Their cultures, languages, and daily lives have been deeply intertwined. The river Ganga is a profound symbol of faith and reverence for millions of Hindus. So throwing meat waste into it isn't just a religious insult. It's a direct attack on the shared cultural fabric that has held the entire society together for generations.
And finally, he brings the hammer down legally. As an advocate, Qureshi points directly to the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, the legal code. He states that deliberately hurting religious feelings to provoke unrest is not just bad manners or poor theology, it is a strictly punishable crime.
He isn't just asking for apologies here.
No, he is demanding strict, immediate police action against the perpetrators. He argues that the law must step in and send a clear, unequivocal message that religious provocation designed to tear the social fabric will not be tolerated.
I want to pause here because this is such a striking example of the dynamics we've been discussing all day. Here is a practitioner of a specific faith, publicly, morally, and legally calling out members of his own community.
Demanding accountability.
Yes, he is demanding that they stop using their religion as a weapon of tribal identity for social media clout, and instead align their actions with the true, peaceful, internal intent of their faith's engineering manual.
It is a powerful demand for internal accountability. And the way he ends his article is incredibly telling. After delivering this stern legal and moral warning to his own community, this Muslim advocate signs off by wishing his readers a happy Hindu New Year.
Wow.
And he writes, Vande Mataram, which translates to, I praise thee, motherland.
It's an incredible juxtaposition. You have an article dealing with a really ugly, visceral incident of religious provocation, but it ends with a profound demonstration of the exact unity and shared human dharma that the first two texts were talking about.
It brings everything full circle.
It really does. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I mean, we have ancient Hindu texts mapped to modern intelligence layers, philosophical definitions separating divine natural law from human-made sex, and modern legal pleas from a Muslim advocate demanding respect for a Hindu river. How do we synthesize all of this information?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the through line is actually quite simple, even though the subject matter is incredibly complex. Whether we are talking about the 9 progressive psychological stages of Navdurga, the intense self-discipline and internal purification of Ramadan, or the fundamental, inescapable biological laws of Dharma.
The ultimate goal is always internal.
Yes. True spirituality across all these sources is defined strictly as an internal transformation. It is about self-transcendence.
It's about upgrading your own operating system, not shouting at your neighbor because they happen to use a different operating system.
Exactly. The moment religion becomes an external tribal identity, like a label you wear just to prove you are different from or better than someone else, it ceases to be Dharma. It becomes the exact kind of societal evil, the exact kind of suffering that the pawns were originally created by those higher souls to cure in the first place.
That is such a powerful takeaway.
The practical application for you listening to this is to look past the labels of any system. You have to evaluate the actions. Does a spiritual practice or a person's behavior actually bring light, restraint, and unity to the community? Are they building a sturdy bridge? Or are they just throwing trash in the river for a social media reel?
That is the ultimate litmus test right there. It really strips away the complicated theology, the ancient timelines, and the dense terminology, and brings it right down to basic human behavior. The texts are all essentially saying, don't tell me what your religion is, show me your Dharma, show me how your engineering manual made you a better architect of human compassion.
Because the manuals are all different, right? The languages are different, and the rituals are obviously different. But the definition of a well-built bridge is universal. It either holds weight or it collapses.
I love that. And that actually brings us to the end of our deep dive today. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something to explore on your own that builds on what we've uncovered in these sources today.
I'm intrigued.
If these historical religious texts, these panths, were essentially the technologies or engineering manuals designed by higher thinkers to upgrade human consciousness thousands of years ago, what is the panth of the future going to look like?
Oh, wow.
Right. In a world hyper-connected by the internet, artificial intelligence, and instant global communication, are we on the verge of humans writing a completely new digital engineering manual for universal harmony? If the old manuals are bound by human time, what does the manual for the next 1,000 years look like? Something to think about. Until next time, keep exploring.